So we've had certified specialty in areas since the late 80s, and cardiovascular and pulmonary would be one of the earliest, as well as clinical electrophysiology. Originally, the design was that it would be voluntary, and it would be unrestricted, meaning that it didn't mean you couldn't practice in that area if you didn't have one, but it would be intended to give some description of an advanced clinical knowledge, experience, and skills in certain areas. However, over our many years of doing this, that actually has happened where it's been used to separate in some ways. And two good examples would be clinical electrophysiology. Although in many states you can do a clinical electrophysiological exam without board specialization, our government payment, Medicare, won't pay for it unless it's done by a board certified electrophysiologist or under the supervision of one. So that's a place where it wasn't intended, but now it's being used that way. Sports is another example. There are many locations where you can't cover live events if you're not sports certified. And again, that's now separating out your ability and it's linking it to the specialization, but that's being done by the community, not being done by the specialization academy itself. And so it's a 10-year certification in those multiple areas. Our most recent one that just started was wound management, and that just brought its first class in February. And it costs about $1,400 in order to take the specialization. If you're not a member, it would be more like $2,400. And so then we also asked ourselves, what's the return on investment? And we recently just did a survey and identified that physical therapists that are board certified are making about $4,500 a year more than non-certified specialists. So we actually are seeing it trickle into the payment realm. 53% of employers paid at least some cost associated with getting the specialization, and 43% of employers are giving priority in job hiring to applicants who are board certified. So we're starting to now collect the data on the back end to see what does it mean and where's the advantage. Interestingly, we have a relationship between board certification and residency and fellowship training. It's not a required pathway, but it's linked. And so what we see is most all residents, graduate residents in residency programs go on to take board specialization. It's usually the pinnacle of having completed the residency, but it's not the only pathway to become board certified. However, we find residents pass at around 94%, and the general physical therapy population following specialization passes at a 77% rate. So what that's actually showing us is that those who are residency trained pass the exam for specialization at a higher rate. It's also a fast track. They can actually become eligible to sit for the board specialization sooner than someone who's not going through a residency program. So there are a couple advantages to using the residency pathway, but our residency pathway is also growing. We only have 7,000 residency trained individuals in the United States now, and we're looking at graduating around 700 a year. So that's certainly not the only pathway. We have 30,000 board certified specialists in the States, and that's about 15% of all physical therapists licensed in the United States. So the residency pathway is not big enough to feed the whole system, but it certainly is likely a fast track and probably gets you there with a little greater success. So that's really where we have been in the specialty process. And interestingly, we're now talking about feasibility of what it means for advanced practice and pathways for advanced practice, and how are they similar and how are they different. So again, hearing all of the different perspectives is very helpful. To get a board certification in a specialty area, a description of specialty practice has to be created. And that has to be a vetted and validated tool that says these are the pieces of knowledge, skills, and abilities that would go into that specialization. And then that would then lead to the exam that's taken. And then after that, you have 10 years before you recertify. Every 3 years, you have to demonstrate certain levels of clinical judgment and practice. And then in the 10th year, it's another exam in order to maintain your certification for the next 10 years. So that's been our process since the 80s, pretty much in the States.
And you have residencies, which you talked about. Are they, is there any oversight by the APTA, or is it on a state level? How is it managed and developed?
So both groups have oversight from the American Physical Therapy Association. One is the American Board of Physical Therapy Specialties, and that is a division of the American Physical Therapy Association. And so that oversees the description of specialty practice and its validation, as well as the exam development and the maintenance of specialty certification. That's that every 3-year pathway that you need to go to in order to maintain your specialization. That's all overseen at the level of the American Physical Therapy Association. Concurrently, we have our overseeing group, which is the American Board of Physical Therapy Residency and Fellowship Education Group. So that is separate from the board specialization group, but also a division of the American Physical Therapy Association. And that group accredits residency programs. So that involves everything from a submission of application, as well as description of all the behaviors and expectations and rules and content, as well as site visits, et cetera. And then that requires annual updates to maintain that accreditation of an individual site. So those are also accredited by a subdivision.